Dear colleagues, we're on day 145 of Ukraine's heroic resistance against Russia's aggression. My name is Natalia Staroprava. We're continuing our series of briefings at Media Center Ukraine. With us today is Yuriy Ignat, spokesperson for the Air Force of Ukraine's Armed Forces. Hello, sir. Could you tell us about the situation on the front line over the past 24 hours? Over the past 24 hours, there haven't been particular changes. The enemy continues to control the borders around Ukraine. They have not been entering Ukraine's airspace. They're not been entering the space controlled by our air defense. Can you hear me, sir? Thank you. This is better. This has to do with the fact that our aviation, the enemy's aviation, is reluctant to enter the airspace covered by our air defense. More often, we have to take down drones, like yesterday. Another possible target are cruise missiles by the enemy's cruise missiles. Over the past 3 days, we've had two cruise missile attacks on the eastern axis, and half of the missiles, Hustle 1 or Ha 555, 4 of 6 were destroyed by our air defenses. Our aviation is working. As of yesterday, there was we've had over 1,500 group strikes on occupiers' positions since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Up to 20 cars were destroyed, of the enemy's cars were destroyed yesterday, as well as a checkpoint. We've had radio signals saying that the Russian command is missing about 30 occupiers, 30 actual personnel. These are the results. As far as missile strikes, yesterday was pretty quiet. The enemy's been using has been using artillery. Uh, so of course, because the air raid sound is the same, many people think this is a missile strike. But these man-pads, these are man-pads attack, which are of course still dangerous for civilians. If there are questions, I could give you more specific information. Well, we can continue for now. The President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the Russians have fired over 3,000 missiles on Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. You've already partially mentioned, but could you tell us what sort of weapons has Russia been using against Ukraine, and how many more missiles does Russia still have on their hands? Understood. Well, as far as how many they have left, that's probably a question more to the structures who study this, our intelligence and perhaps the security service. So we have to hope that there are fewer and fewer, but we can't become complacent and relax too much. We have to be prepared for these strikes, which continue both on our armed forces and on peaceful territories, peaceful towns. We hope they're running out. Our data seem to suggest that. The data that we have on the enemy's use of these manpads and missiles. Yes, the president has mentioned the use of about 3,000 missiles of different types and class. Yes, we're talking about cruise missiles, various types of cruise missiles. We're talking about aviation missiles, air to surface. We have Iskanders and Bastions. Sorry, Iskander and Tochka-U, as well as the Onyx, the Coast Guard rockets. Yes, this is a massive massive armory that is falling on Ukrainians' heads, and these are the challenges we're facing. Moreover, the enemy has been using ever more um, very old school missiles, such as Ha-31, Ha-22. These are increasingly used against the territory of Ukraine. This might suggest that the modern means and defenses are being saved by the enemy, are being kept by the enemy. Also, we've seen instances by the occupiers using uh, S-300 man-portable air defense system uh, on ground targets. This this complex may hit air targets as well as ground targets and water targets. During the shooting of our air defense anti-aircraft forces, we've done these at the polygon, the training for the S-300. We've been trying to hit ground targets, so this isn't a problem for this complex. The problem is that there will be less destruction because the complex is aimed at the air target. The thousands of elements that explode um, are aimed at hitting, damaging the fuselage of an aircraft that it is not armored. So, but again, this says that the enemy has a surplus of S-300 missiles because they have a significant assortment of various modifications of the book missile system, and S-400. Now we're talking about S-500. So the enemy clearly has these missiles, a surplus of these missiles, and has decided to use them against ground targets. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, how have the Russians' tactics changed? Well, as far as air, the tactics, we've talked about in the first month of war, these have been clear dogfights, air fights, a lot of aviation, um, much has been brought to bear. Now the enemy is essentially working from behind the state border of Ukraine, using every airfield they have, not only in Russia but also in occupied Crimea, but also in Belarus. They have a lot of airfields there, which are used to base Russian forces, Russian aviation means. Moreover, the enemy keeps sending Il-76 to Belarus, Il-76 aircraft to Belarus to send weapons and technology, and also using these airfields to strike the territory of Ukraine with aviation missiles. The enemy's aviation is patrolling around Ukraine, the airspace around Ukraine, day and night, 24/7. Also in the waters of the Black Sea, approaching the territory of the Snake Islands, Zmyiny Island, and also in the territory of Russia, Belarus. They are firing Hustle-1 rockets from the Caspian Basin. So these tactics, which we've seen yesterday, so this tactics of these distance strikes, that remains. The enemy does not enter the area covered by Ukraine's air defense and is striking these, using these missiles to strike. Some of them are taken down by our air defense, but there are targets that there are still hits on civilian objects, and unfortunately we have peaceful civilians casualties. Additionally to the waters of the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, and Belarus, where else is the enemy? What other areas is the enemy aiming at Ukraine for? Well, I mean, basically, I've said that the strikes have been coming, the missile strikes, the technological strikes. As far as the Black Sea, it's Kalibr missiles. if it's Astrakhan, then we have this is again the north of the Caspian area. These are Hassel 1 or Ha 555. These missiles are. It doesn't really matter where they're coming from, because the distance of the flight of Hustle one can fly 5,000 over 5,000 kilometers, 3,000 miles. They can essentially reach the end of Europe from the Caspian Sea. Kaliber is 2,500 kilometers. So the enemy is attacking from different axes, different directions, and unfortunately, some of the rockets are reaching the targets, which is why we keep saying, and it's not only us. This is also said in the media, and many people in the social media. This is discussed. We're talking about the systems of air defense, providing the sort of weapons to Ukraine that might defend Ukraine's sky against Russian aviation and from including Russian missiles. The Russian military have continued to lie about strikes against civilian objects where supposedly Ukrainian military had been, or military objects had been. What can you say about this? There is there's not much to say. I mean, you have to trust reliable sources of information um, rather than Russian propaganda and fakes. Because unfortunately, every information we hear from Russia is an achievement. There have been no losses. There have been no casualties. If we're talking about aviation, they have basically destroyed 3 times more aviation than we ever had. So I would suggest taking Russian claims with a massive dollop of salt. This is clearly aimed at an internal audience to placate the internal listener to show the invincibility of the special military operation, the invincibility of the Russian military. This is lies and manipulation uh, and fairy tales. I would not recommend that people listen to them, and stick to reliable sources of information. Thank you. With us was Yuriy Ignat, spokesperson of the Air Force of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. At 3 o'clock, we'll be talking to Hindus Mamedov, uh, Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine.